Hey there, it's Nick Terzo, and this is the Radical Podcast. No, we won't be overthrowing any governments, but we will be learning from radical creatives who rule the world. Hey there, it's Nick Terzo, and this is The Radical. Another gentle reminder to please subscribe, rate, and review this show wherever you do listen to your podcasts. Also, to keep up on the latest and the greatest, please follow us on Instagram at The Radical Pod. My guest this week perfectly embodies the balance of artist and humanitarian. He has chalked up 8 Billboard Top 20 hits, has won a couple of Grammys, and brought tons of joy to millions of fans around the globe. I'm thrilled to have Jason Mraz join me. Jason and I will mix it up, discussing topics from music to organic farming to philanthropy, and even starting his own record label. Jason's newest record, Look for the Good, encompasses all the positivity and light that we need as we collectively shove this year out the door. I've known this man a couple of decades and could not be any more proud of his remarkable accomplishments. This is a great one. Next up, my expansive conversation with Jason Mraz. Hey, Jason Mraz.
Hey, Nick Terzo. How you doing?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you. It is a good morning.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
How is life on the Mraz family farm during this interesting time?
Blessed. Really blessed. You know, when we started homesteading, I'd say as early as 2010, you do so thinking, oh, one day we can live off the land. Or, you know, you have these little house on the prairie type of aspirations. You think they're never going to come true. You can't not go to the grocery store, but you do your best to supplement your groceries with a garden or something. And boy, I'll tell you, when they told us to stay home and stay away from folks and wear masks, etc., yeah, you know, we had the same sort of panic and upset as everyone else. But at the same time, I thought, I am so grateful to my younger self for choosing to come live out here on a little piece of land where I can practice regenerative agriculture. And I can practice feeding myself from the earth. It's not easy to do. I'm not very successful at it. But I am blessed. That is the answer. I am just so blessed that I have this little sanctuary out here, which was originally created to be a retreat between tours. I just wanted to move out here so between tours I could have a place to regenerate my thoughts, my energy, and my music as well. I don't think I ever planned to be here for long periods of time. So this year was the first year, almost going on a full year, that I've been here. There are weeks of this year that I had never seen before here. For example, the first week of June. I've never been on this property the first week of June after 15 years. So when that came around, I didn't realize it until I started to notice the light was different, or that I was around for the entire season of the loquat, where usually I'm packing my bags as the loquats are coming on, and then they're only a memory, or they're only a story, a legend. So this year, you know, I've had the blessing of experiencing the fruits of my many years of labor here.
And is it, other than providing for you and your family and whoever else is on the farm, is support, is it a commercial venture too? I mean, do you grow enough product that you can do that?
Of a few things, yes. We grow avocados, and that was something that I inherited by buying the house. Is the yard was planted as an avocado orchard, and I got into that probably about 5 years after living here. I realized, whoa, I'm the guy responsible for the fate of these trees. If I don't do anything, the trees will age out. They'll get very tall and leggy and stop producing fruit. So I had to start pruning them and feeding them and minding them, and they are what really brought me into the grove and kind of turned me on to the possibility of plants and soil and creating things from that. So avos were already here in my love, falling in love with the trees and wanting to be a more ambitious farmer gardener, I also added coffee in between all of the avocado trees, which is another commercial crop we grow. And I did that because avos by themselves don't really pay the bills. They don't cover your labor, and they certainly don't cover your water. And I didn't want to just rely on music my whole life to pay for my farming hobby. I wanted to see if I could join the entrepreneurial farmer sort of game and see if I couldn't figure out how to grow commercially to basically sustain my love of farming.
Do you have additional acreage there, or do you have the same acreage, or have you expanded?
We have expanded, yeah, and I guess that was we were a little hungry. I don't know that I'll expand anymore, but we're now up to about 17 farmed acres. Well, maybe 15. I should say 15.
Wow.
It's it's a lot,
Hmm.
and more than I ever thought I would enjoy. No, I thought I would enjoy it more than I do. That's the answer. But it's because it's really hard work. I think what I've done is I've gone from a hobby to we are a premium grow facility. We have the infrastructure to grow large quantities at and really deliver something that is beautiful. It requires nutrition. It requires farmers' footsteps. It requires a lot of pruning, a lot of weeding and beneficial insects because we're all organic. So we mostly just grow grasses and weeds, but we're learning to identify them and figure out which ones are our allies and which ones are a nuisance. But again, all of this stuff really just came out of a love of the land and feeling like I wanted to work in my backyard a little bit. Some days I wake up and go, why did I turn my backyard into a business? That could potentially bankrupt me as well. But so far so good. We're looking long term here. This isn't about short term gains.
I thought all you fancy pop stars had swimming pools and tennis courts in your backyards.
You know what? I do have a swimming pool, and we have a well that we installed, which is very fancy. So we have a well which gives us the ability to drill down into the earth about 500 feet or so and access the water. Well, on the well line, for the irrigation lines, we also hooked it up to a nutrition system. It's called fertigation, fertilizer in the irrigation. So we're basically putting like fish emulsion and all kinds of yummy nutrient sludge in the water line. Well, the reason I'm telling you this story is because when we decided to fill our pool with well water, we filled our pool with pond scum. So we have a fish emulsion, algae rich pond scum swimming pool that nobody wants to swim in. It has since been remedied. It has since been remedied, but yeah, that's our fancy pool for you.
Kind of your organic koi pond, so to speak.
Very,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, as part of your entrepreneurial path, you've started your own record label now. Is that true? Interrobang, is that what it's called or not?
It's totally interrobang. And
Interrobang.
interrobang is the word for the punctuation, exclamation point and question mark. So when you put them side by side, it makes you go, huh? Or it makes you go, I love it. What is it? Exclamation point, question mark. So we came up with a little logo of the two of them where they look like a little a music note. And I wanted to create a lane for the kind of music that I love, but doesn't really fit in any lane. Or I didn't want to be limited to the pop genre any longer. I'll probably always have a foot in the pop world because I just grew up on the pentatonic scale and that's who I am. But I came right out of the gates with this new record label venture with the reggae album that I partnered up with Michael Goldwasser of Easy Star. I happen to be wearing the Easy Star hoodie today.
Look for the good, right? That's what it's called?
Look for the Good is the new album produced by Michael Goldwasser of Easy Star, and we intentionally set out to make a reggae album from the start. It wasn't that, we had happened to become reggae. No, we started, even the demos were reggae, and this was I wanted to do something completely different than what I'd done before, but it also still gave me access to rapping and melody and current events and singing about issues that I care about. Whereas in the pop lane, I tend to stay more towards the wedding songs, which is fine because I love relationship and self-love and self-healing and all that type of songs. But reggae was more of an expression about we and us and how we as a humanity can hopefully continue to uplift each other. Um, and most recently, we put out I shouldn't even say we put out, but we put out a friend's record, Gregory Page, who was a longtime hero of mine here in San Diego. Over 20 years I've known the guy. He gave me my first gig in San Diego. Bill Silva took me to Java Joe's. We saw a songwriter showcase. I got to participate. And Gregory Page pulled me aside and said, hey, why don't you come down next weekend and play a few songs before my show? And so technically that was my first gig. I actually have a little sign. You can't see it, but there's a little sign on the wall right there, which is written in crayon, Gregory Page and Jason Mraz tonight at 9:00, which was my first poster at Java Joe's. So Gregory said, I want to put my album out on Interrobang. I said, well, that's funny because we don't really have label services yet. We're just a logo at this point, and we're distributed by BMG, thankfully. So really BMG is doing the heavy lifting. But he says, no, it's okay. Can I just put your logo on my album? I said, sure. But in that process, we all just started to think about, well, what could we do? And so we're basically a new model where all we've done for Gregory is give him a small business loan, really, that allows him to manufacture his LPs. Because I think for artists that are coming into a studio, it's hard enough to get seen and heard, but let alone drop money on not just a recording, but the additional money on physical product, which is disappearing. People aren't buying as many CDs and certainly not as many vinyls, even though they're selling. So long story short, we gave Gregory enough money to manufacture those vinyls, and we will help him sell those, but we're not taking a royalty, and we're basically just selling enough vinyl that we get our loan back. But after that, all the product really lives in his hands. He owns the master, everything. And it was basically, I saw this opportunity with my little label to just help people out without trying to own them or even capitalize on them or be an entrepreneur on somebody else's life or livelihood. But instead, let's just become part of the same family and just uplift each other. And ironically or karmically, since we put his album a week ago, we've seen sales of my own album go up, I think, just from the relationship on Interrobang. So just through the act of doing good and promoting our friend, we've also seen an uptick in our sales, which is really, really cool. When Interrobang first launched with the reggae album, I also saw an opportunity with the surplus of the money that came from BMG. I had all my recording costs covered, and all the musicians were covered, producers covered, engineer covered, everything's great. But you still end up with an advance. It's typical that a record company will give you an advance, and this is something to live on while royalties are being, I guess, tallied or accumulated, and you'll eventually be paid later, right? After promo expenses.
Perhaps not.
Well, I don't spend a whole lot of money at a major label. I don't think I do. We keep our promo and our production costs really low, and I don't want to ever be in debt with another company. And but regardless, they gave me a really lovely advance, and I just didn't feel like I felt like, wow, this is play money. Like, what can I do with this advance? And our album came out June 19th, which is historically known as Juneteenth, which is essentially the day slavery was finally abolished in the last state in the U.S. And it was a huge historical day this year because the U.S. got a history lesson, an education. I am definitely a student of the continued education of this country. So I decided I would just donate all of the surplus of this album, which sings about equality, which sings about the advancement of equality. Rather than just have a lyric, why don't I put all the money into programs and movements like the organization Black Lives Matter, which is pushing for pragmatic policies to protect Black lives. It's doing way more than I probably could from sitting at home. So give them a huge chunk of money. Equal Justice Initiative, a Grassroots Law, which is a phenomenal new sort of law-based startup that is going after criminal justice, especially criminal justice reform. We've seen that has been one of the biggest illnesses of the U.S. Coming into the light, is the police brutality and how Black people are disproportionately treated worse. You know what I'm saying? Um, in this world. Some local organizations also benefited from that surplus. Center for Policy Initiative, RISE San Diego, and San Diego Young Artist Music Academy. So 6 organizations right off the bat received 5-digit, very, very substantial 5-digit donations from the advance of the record. And it was no loss to me. So I look at Interrobang as a new model for how can I make cool music that's outside of the box and then also do good with it. So we get to explore that going forward.
Huge props to you. I mean, that's just,
Cool. Yeah.
you were such an amazing human to do that. And
Oh,
I love,
shucks.
no, and the model is fantastic. It's kind of an incubation model without any of the predatory parts of it, which is nice, so it's going to be
Yeah.
so fantastic for other artists. I mean, what you did for these groups during this year, so amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. We'll see
Kudos
how it
to
plays out
you.
going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh,
It's very exciting. And we're making it up as we go. We have a vision, we have a mission and that sort of thing. But, the world is changing every day dramatically. So, and I believe that in the future, more and more companies will be valued not so much on their sort of stock value, but also in how are they helping to take care of the planet, whether that's environmentally or amongst humans. What are you doing as a corporation or as a big company or as a winner? What are you doing to help others? And I think we really will be judged on that in the not too distant future.
well, I think both by employees and by consumers.
For
It's
sure.
definitely become a part of any buying or decision or where you're going to work decision.
Exactly.
So when did you record this prior to COVID where you were able to all be in
Yeah,
a room together?
we sure were. We recorded October of 2019 in this studio. I have a larger room just next door here, and then this space as well. It was the first time I made an album here from top to bottom. I've workshopped songs here since 2007. I've done a few tracks that got released here, but never a full album. So, and we did make this album prior to having any type of deal with any distributor. So we didn't know what we were doing or where this was going to go. So with that came all this freedom and joy of just making music in the backyard. And Michael helped me put together a phenomenal band. There was about 13 of us in the band that included some people that I knew, some people that he knew, that made this really beautiful, eclectic group of people who also knew the pocket and intricacies of reggae, which is a lot harder than it sounds. It's a tricky music to play. It's like slow motion funk. There's a lot of air. There's a lot of pocket in it.
You've always had a little bit of that kind of underlying your music, haven't you? I mean, from the beginning, I thought you've always seemed to have that flavor there, let's say.
I, I, I guess so. I didn't really know it until I was touring, and I would have, a rhythm section that could help me, you know, bring the obvious of reggae forward, which would be in the rhythm. But prior to that, I'm just kind of a coffee shop or campfire singer, songwriter. And with that, I'm banging on the guitar in maybe a primal or rootsy way that would allow my music to go to reggae. Should we pair ourselves with some musicians that also speak that language? But it has also worked for me to drift off in other directions too. So I feel I I feel like a great song could be dressed up in any genre. It really could. If the bones are good, if the heart of the song is pure, then it could be dressed up in any style and it would still work.
For sure. And you end it with gratitude, which is a very personal song. Um, I think that's where it would go in a sequence on the record. It makes sense that it's the last song, and it's really beautiful, and it's very transparent on your part. It's a fantastic song.
Thanks.
You
Thanks. I got introduced to gratitude as a practice around 2008, and I've been trying to weave it in. Anytime I learn a lesson that I think is valuable to at least how I perceive life or and experience life, I try to weave that into songs, thinking this could be medicine, or at least it's going to be medicine for me every time I sing it. I'm going to get the reminder of this life lesson. And practicing gratitude is just that. To wake up and maybe even say out loud, I am grateful for this human life, this precious life, and I'm not going to waste it today. Saying it out loud is different than just thinking it, because internally I have a dozen thoughts happening at the same time. Which one is going to be the loudest, right? But if I say it out loud, it almost commands it. It brings that thought forward. And so a practice of gratitude is really trying to presence what I'm grateful for. And when that happens, you get to experience abundance. You get to experience the abundance of love in your life, the abundance of support and shelter, and whatever that looks like to you, right? So weaving that into a song, and I thought, to really practice gratitude, I need to also forgive my enemies, and I have to thank them even for the experiences that were not so great, but helped shape who I am. So that gratitude was, in a way, it was about a 10-year work in progress, trying to figure out how am I going to address this song and mean it. And when this album came up, when we started workshopping these songs here in the studio, it clicked, but I always left the ending open to improv. So the whole time we were tracking, I was doing it different every time, and I was just going off until ultimately I'd done enough that I kind of was able to see which ones I thought were important to me. Parents getting divorced, which is not a likely thing to be grateful for. But also trying to keep it lighthearted and silly, like the cats that trip me up every day walking around here. So gratitude. Thanks for mentioning that. It's a unique song, but it does close Look for the Good. And I think a practice of gratitude helps us look for the good. When someone says, what are you grateful for? Well, the first thing you look for is something that you like, right?
Right.
Oh, well, let's look for something good. So I'm grateful for you, Nick Terzo. It's nice to have this conversation.
Well, and I'm back at you. I'm grateful, and this has been too long a gap for us. But and I wish I'd gotten to this record in the summer, because it's such a great summer record. When I started listening to it like back in like September. It's like I think I missed this record. Was so perfect for the summer. It's so upbeat. It's lovely.
Great. Yeah, side effect of this project was that every song you can dance to it. Didn't anticipate that. I wasn't even thinking dance. I was just thinking reggae. I love the reggae grooves. But, for years and years going through Electra and Atlantic, a common comment from A&R was, we got to have something a little more up tempo. We got to can we pick it up a little bit? Let's get us dancing. And that was a struggle for me on many albums. And then here comes this album in the backyard that I have no plan for, and every song you can dance to. Like, how did that happen? It was like maybe just finally took the ceiling away or the pressure off, and the result is I'm free, I'm dancing, and how about that? But you know what? Next summer, you can listen to the album next summer when it rolls around.
It's evergreen. It will be there.
It is.
It will be there. How did your kind of collaboration with like Tiffany Haddish come about for You Do You?
I met her through a friend, and I have been spending a few weeks trying to figure out who I could get to like add their voice to You Do You. The part was written by Abby Dorsey, also known as MC Flo, who for fans, MC Flo and her band are the gang vocals or the choir vocals on I'm Yours. So that dates all the way back to 2007, and we recorded those vocals here. I've known Abby a really long time, since the coffee shop days. She's a great writer, and I think she's a great artist, but she doesn't always want to be in the front. She's like, I'm not trying to be an artist, but I'd love to be a writer and help other writers out. So when we got to this part, I had her vocal on the track for a very long time, but we thought we should find somebody out there who is public facing that might resonate with these words and throw down. And when I met Tiffany and asked her if she would be interested, she didn't even think twice. She just said yes. And I thought, oh, okay, that was a nice yes. You know, that was the kind of yes you say so you don't have to say no, but then you never hear from that person again.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
she
Yes.
called, yeah. But then she called and was like, let's do this. And we even gave her the freedom, like, you can write whatever you want. We can mix this up and change it. And so we were in the studio about 2 days later, and she came in and just said, you know what, all these words are what I would want to say. And she changed a little bit just to give it her own, to make it truly her words. Uh, but it was just in the aligning of two like minds that wanted to do something cool, which is what I'm trying to say is me with this song, and I saw Tiffany as this really cool and outgoing person, um, who also wanted to get down. We share a photographer friend. We share a friend who happens to be a photographer who shoots for us both, who introduced us, and just I don't know what to say about Tiffany. I feel like we're very, very similar. We come from small towns, care about where we came from, excited to be doing crazy new things that make us as artists feel alive and pushing ourselves, but still with our feet on the ground, and hope that everything we're doing is part of a web that's doing good in the world. Not trying to participate in negative type of things. And so I think our project just resonated with the kind of work that she's doing.
No, it's perfect casting for that song. You've
Yeah,
done good. It's perfect.
thanks.
So perfect. And then you also released just prior, I think, to the election, Bad Wolves. Is that with Rebecca
Yeah.
Jade? And
Wow, good find.
that's an interesting song, man. That's a really interesting song. Did you?
Yeah,
I didn't check any credits on it or anything, so I'm a little naive here. Did you write that or
a
co-write
little
that?
bit, a little bit. Yeah, I co-wrote that. That really started out with an artist named Veronica May, who's currently based in Colorado, and she's a brilliant artist, an amazing musician, a great songwriter and recording artist. And she reached out, basically in the thick of everything we were seeing this summer on the news. She said, I have to create something that is my expression for this. And we as artists, I think, looked at this year as how can we make a music version of a musical version of a protest song, or a sign you would take to a protest, right? The beauty of a protest are all of these expressions, all of these brilliant signs and powerful statements. And this statement too of just coming together and en masse and showing up that we disapprove of this. So same thing, we decided to create a song that would do that, that would bring a lot of different artists together and all lend their voice to this one song that Veronica had started. So each artist that's in the track wrote a lot of what they performed. Mickey Vale, Rebecca Jade, and Veronica May, uh, all phenomenal artists. And then Ebony, of course, did the video, and the video was phenomenal. And even more phenomenal, she shot the whole thing in about 2 hours, and it looks like it took a whole weekend. But she's such a visionary and knows how to shoot from the hip and be organized. Um, it's worth looking up because it reflects on what we see a lot this year on the news, but it's done through dance and through song to just hopefully continue to break our hearts open so we can be more compassionate and have more empathy so that we can continue to help change the world for the better and heal the world for all of our wrongs that we've committed in the past. So Bad Wolves is a song that really looks at that in hopes of shining a light on some shadows.
Yeah, it's remarkably almost otherworldly. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I don't dissect songs here too much. it's just otherworldly in its feel and its sound, and it always feels, I don't know, it just takes me back somewhere like early in the century, and it goes
Wow.
somewhere else for me. So I was really taken by it. So
Beautiful. Thank you. It was produced by Jeff Berkeley, who actually runs my studio here 5 days a week. He has his own sound, Berkeley Sound. He engineered the reggae album as well. He's a phenomenal singer-songwriter, great engineer all around, great producer all around.
mm,
A shout out to Jeff.
quite a team. You've done good, son.
I lucked out because I'm not out there looking for it, but I just keep my heart open and keep my ears open. People come to me and I get a lot of ideas thrown at me, a lot of invitations, and I'm grateful for that. And I do try to be very, very, very selective because otherwise I would just be busy all the time. I'd like to say quite a team, but Jeff had his own studio. Robbie Robinson had his own studio, and both of these guys called me up about 2 years ago, and they're like, "Hey, studios aren't what they used to be. We have a bunch of gear. Do you want it?" I was like, "Nah, man, I don't need any more gear." They're like, "Come on, let us store our gear at your place." Crap.
That's a
I
good
didn't.
one.
I didn't see it, right? But they're like, "We have this beautiful Neve console, and you can use it." I was like, "I don't need it, man. I'm set." So they're like, "Well, come on, let us put it over there." So finally, they talked me into it, and it's been so great because what ended up happening is they didn't just store their gear over here; they set up shop over here, and it's been fantastic. So because I live out on the fringe of San Diego, almost 5 days a week, San Diego artists come to our studio and they record here with Jeff. So it still keeps me connected to the San Diego music scene, the same coffee shop scene, which has essentially been closed thanks to COVID. Um, but thanks to Jeff and Robbie, who run the studio here, I'm meeting all kinds of artists and staying connected with old friends as well at the same time. And when it came time to record the reggae album, the room was already dialed in. Jeff already had everything just clean and warm. So when we showed up to play, it was really easy. And I would not have been able to do that if I'd have rejected their invitation to take all the studio gear. If I'd have said, "No, I'm fine here," I would have had to outsource a place to handle all 13 of my band, or at least bring in an engineer and figure the room out. But when you have a full-time engineer here, uh, those sort of things get sorted out. So it's it's family. There isn't. We're just sharing a space. It's as easy as that. And I'm so grateful that I did it.
Right. So there's something I wanted to ask you, because when I was around you on a more regular basis, I was always kind of blown away and impressed by your work ethic. And I've never, seriously, no, I've never, very seldom did I ever see you say no to anything. And you,
Oh gosh.
no, stop. And you, during that period of time, before I'm yours,
Uh-huh.
you were a really hard worker. And whether it was presenting yourself publicly, doing press, having to work with a band and tour with a band that's, kind of a hired band, not necessarily you formed a band. Um, as you've gotten older, it's a long question. How have you adjusted your life with balance in it? Because I really thought then you kind of were a bit on tilt with what was asked of you. Um, and how have you gotten yourself into some balance, even though having a farm, music career, all your charity work and service work? How do you balance it?
I'm still learning. I really am. Um, I think the easiest way to balance it is I have a short yoga routine that I do in the morning, and that alone gives me a foundation to build my day on, right? I feel like if I don't do it, the foundation could be wobbly, and any type of yes or any type of project that I have committed is going to get some kind of rushed or unbalanced treatment or something. Whereas if I build myself up in the morning with the right attitude and the right framework in my mind, then any conversation and any new request that comes in, I won't be overwhelmed by it because I'll be solid on that. So that is my first piece of having balance, I guess, what you've just asked. And I found that probably around 2006, 2007, after getting burnt out around 2005 and 6. Um, Burnout because doing enough interviews and 2 albums back to back, I didn't, all I was talking about was like hotel travel and gigging, and I didn't feel like I related to anyone. So I came home really for the first time and spent many months just doing my laundry and grocery shopping and discovering yoga really. It had been introduced to me, but I didn't go deeper into it until then. And I've tried to maintain that since then. And I've I have to credit that for having even more success after that, because life did get busier around 2008, and maintaining some kind of mindful practice has allowed me to just take all that in, and at the same time have a kind of non-attachment to it, where it could all go away and that's fine as well, because gosh, I love a day off. I made a huge mistake, or maybe a great mistake, about 3 years ago. I left my management firm. I left Bill Silva Management, um, mainly because I thought, okay, I'm turning 40. I've done it. I've fulfilled all my records with the major. I don't need any new contracts. I'm probably just going to be a farmer. I'm just going to shut down for a while. And that included everything, including leaving my management firm. And I don't know what happened, but I probably shut down for about 6 weeks and thought, I can't sit still. I can't just really be a farmer. That's not really sustainable. And I have all this music in me, and I just continue to generate and generate. And then next thing you know, I'm learning how to self-manage. But I've been lucky enough to be able to do it on kind of coasting still on the fumes of great management for 18 years. So Bill Silva basically set me up for success very, very early, introduced me to the mindfulness and a spiritual way of living, one that is kind to oneself and to others. So if you put that into your entrepreneurial ambitions, then you won't get beat down or beat up by the competition, I think, as much. So if I didn't have my yoga practice, if I didn't have gratitude, the competition of the industry would probably turn me into a bitter, resentful person. So I've been learning to self-manage, but I use Bill Silva and everything from 18 years as a model for what to do. And then I have an amazing team still, tour manager. I still have my lawyer. I still have a communications person handling my socials, and merch manager. I still have a great team that I would typically tour with. And the idea was that we would still do shows from time to time. Didn't anticipate signing a new record deal with BMG. Didn't anticipate COVID happening and staying home for a year. And I didn't anticipate anything. So like I said at the beginning of this conversation, we're just making it up. And I don't always have the balance to self-manage and run the farm and the music industry and keep track of the foundation. I don't always have it, but I do employ a lot of like-minded people on my team. I'd say there's at least 15 of us that work combined in music, farm, and foundation. And we've all co-authored a vision and a mission together. So even if I'm not checking in daily, I know that the people I work with have the same goal, and we're all going the same direction. So in a way, I get to delegate and see others really uplifted through this experience, which is really nice.
And scaling back, any kind of a global touring cycle has had to be healthy for you. I mean, that's
Yes,
definitely pounds on you.
it does. Part of getting out of a management deal and getting out of a major label deal is I did want to scale back. I look at my favorite band that I modeled since high school was Dave Matthews Band, because he was a local band, and a lot of his touring was on this continent. He rarely did other parts of the globe. It took a while for them to get there, but in my story, Bill Silva had me all over the globe very, very early. And I'm so grateful for that because we do get to service the whole globe when we put an album out. Uh, but being on airplanes and having my feet on the ground in 25, 30 different countries is challenging, really challenging to do. So I did want to scale back and think of myself as more of a local artist. And I didn't know if I'd be able to pull it off, but this year we're forced to pull it off. You know, I don't even know if we'll be able to go overseas next year. Um, so in a way, the universe is kind of gifting me what I had hoped, is that's to learn how to stay put and maybe just tour, domestically.
Let me follow on to that. Is there a country where you're just totally surprised at your success there? Is there one that just says, my head's going to explode? That country?
There's a few places in Asia and Southeast Asia where for some reason the music just it connects. It connects in the Philippines. It connects in Indonesia. It connects in Malaysia and Singapore. And I don't know why. I don't reference anything geographically in the songs. All I can think of is I went to those regions on my first album when I was unknown, and I played in small venues, and I shared random venues with other established artists. And I think making that effort to be present in that region made a lasting impact. As I continued to put albums out, fans grew and grew until ultimately I'm Yours hit, that everyone was like, oh yeah, we know this guy. He comes around here a couple times a year as it is. So I think just making that effort to show up made the biggest impact. But I'm surprised by it because if anyone's ever gone to that part of the world, it can be very, very different. Or at least, I shouldn't say different. It's just, culturally, it's different in maybe dense population, at least certainly in the big cities of Jakarta and Manila. Wow. Densely populated. So you would think, how does one be seen or heard in such a place like this? But so grateful that my music has cut through.
That's awesome. And speaking of kind of staying on the continent or in your country, do you see more Broadway stuff down the road? I mean, did you love doing Waitress when you did it? I mean, was this?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Oh yes, I would do it again. But it would have to be the right show. I don't want to just go and do any old show. Waitress was a perfect show because it was already a hit thanks to Sarah and Jesse Nelson, Sarah Bareilles, who wrote the music. And Dr. Palmer, who I played, only shows up a few times, but he is vital to the story moving along. And he's funny, he's clumsy, and he's kind of behaving badly. And I love all of those things. So I got to do this basically 4-month vacation where I would be paid to go play someone else. It felt like doing Saturday Night Live 8 times a week. Walking into that theater and putting on the costume and going out on stage and making people laugh, or helping them bring tears forward with these touching songs. 8 times a week was just awesome. And then the rest of my time off was go do yoga or go to the gym or go take care of yourself because you have a big gig coming up in 18 hours. I just loved it. I thought I was going to hate it. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be doing the same exact thing every day. This is going to be terrible. But it felt different every time. Every single show felt completely different. And that was a little bit having to do with the cast would shift. The lead would go to an understudy, and then different cast members in the back would change positions even, and other supporting characters would also be changed. The actors would change. So there was always something new happening, which was blowing my mind. Even the band would change around from time to time. And with that came different delivery, a different attitude, and even how the audience was choosing to react to us or not would affect the show. But as long as we leaned on the writing, it was always a great show. And I was just so impressed with that, and with that feeling of that constant newness or that regeneration that was happening at that level, that it makes me want to go back and do it again for sure.
Did you do it for 3 or 4 months? How long was your run?
Yeah, about 3.5 months. So I got to live in New York for 4 months, like almost perfectly 4 months, which was awesome because I lived there when I was 18, going to college. And I left there broke, thinking I'll come back to New York when New York wants to be back. And of course, I went back and played gigs, and I did all the promo stuff and meetings there for years. But I never lived there again until I was 40, and I got to go back because New York called and said, "We want you to come back and do this thing." And it was just a thrill, dream come true.
You've had a lot of those, which is fantastic. I mean, as you've toured the world and you've met everything from presidents on down, has there been any one person in particular that you thought, I'll never meet this person in my whole life, and that you did?
Hmm. Um, Gosh, there are many. There are many. Willie Nelson, James Taylor, Neil Young. James Taylor and Willie were definitely a lot more approachable and conversationalists than Neil. I mean, but the list goes on with icons that I would just usually be speechless or gobsmacked in front of. With James, I met him many times. James Taylor backstage. I saw, I don't know. Oh, he walked by, first time I ever met him, and I said, he was shaking a lot of hands. And I just leaned forward. I was like, Money Machine is one of my favorite songs ever. And he did a little double take, and came back to me, and he started describing to me how they recorded that song about dumping in a bunch of change and had to make these loops, which was hard to do on tape. And I felt really great. Everyone around me is kind of giving me credit for like, hey, I've managed to start a conversation here. We started talking about our tattoos, and things are going really well. And then a couple of weeks later, we're at the Music Cares event honoring Neil Young. I'm backstage, I'm singing with Sean Colvin, and James Taylor's backstage. He's warming up, and he says to us, "Hey, why don't you guys come over here and sing harmony with me?" So now I'm singing a Neil Young song with James Taylor and Sean Colvin. And by the time we go on stage, he's also recruited Emmylou Harris and Dave Matthews. So now we're a super group singing harmony for James Taylor. And this is just beyond my wildest dreams. And at the end of the night, I said, "James, thank you so very much. This was just a thrill." And he says, "My pleasure, Jacob," and walked off. And I was like, oh, that is awesome. That's awesome. Because it's a great story. It sucked because I wanted him to remember my name. But it sucked as well.
It's all good, Jacob. It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah.
So before I cut you loose here, I always ask some people, like, what great are you currently listening to? You went through a few things as we had this discussion, but I was wondering if there was a couple of things right now that you're in love with musically by others.
Yeah, by others. Well, I have to mention Gregory Page, his new album, One Hell of a Memory. But Gregory has probably recorded 20 albums since I've known him, always independent, always puts them out himself or with the help of V2 in the Netherlands, but very, very small distribution. But his songs and his compositions are so beautiful. And I think his new album is timely. It's Irish. It's Irish inspired Americana. Does that even work? How does that work? I don't know. But it's modern folk, and it's great. So I highly recommend that. And I'm all over it. So I love the sound of my voice. What else? I'm looking at my record collection to try to catch my memory of what greats have I been listening to.
I stump people with this a lot because it feels like with streaming, we're kind of all drinking from a fire hose anyway. So it's really hard to pinpoint a few things.
Yes. Well, if I go into recently played, I then have to be very transparent. Scenery, which is the instrumentals collection by Emily King, is phenomenal. I think Emily King will be a household name one day. Think Prince. When you think Emily King, she's just so stylish and beautiful, and there's a punctuation happening in her songs, but the instrumentals version is as cool. And I love a lot of instrumental music because when I wake up in the morning and I'm doing some yoga or when I'm writing in my journal, I mostly want instrumentals. I don't necessarily want other lyricists getting in my way. This dummy, Portishead dummy, I took that for a stroll the other night. Just love those bass heavy organs, keyboards. And I listen to a lot of gospel music. Hezekiah Walker, Kirk Franklin, Aretha Franklin, Pastor T.L. Barrett. I'm not even a Christian guy. I mean, I grew up with that sort of being the culture of our region, but I don't have a path to heaven through a personal savior. But gospel music does something that tickles my fancy and makes me experience heaven on earth. So I listen to a lot of gospel music.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to wrap up here. Having known you for a couple of decades, I just got to say I'm so proud of you as a artist, what you've become, as a songwriter, what you've become, as a humanitarian, even on top of those, just beyond anything. I don't know. You've just turned out so well, and you formed so well, and you've grown so well, and you've been self-aware in how you look at others. You've turned into this. You were an incredible human being back then, but you've morphed into an even bigger Godhead human being. So,
oh my gosh, thanks, Nick. Well, I'm not final. I could screw all of this up next week. I'll try not to.
Yeah, let's not after the year we had. Can you please not do that?
Yeah, I'll try not to.
I don't need to read about that on like December 31st, just when I think I'm done with this year being terrible.
Oh, no, if I do screw it up, I don't plan to make it public.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Well, I can't thank you enough. I miss you. You're always welcome back here. I love hearing what you're working on. I love your attitude and how you approach things, and the positivity needs to be heard in the current environment. So thank you.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for giving me a chance to just talk about all this stuff. Makes me feel special.
That's what's great about podcasting. It's long form, man. It's long form. So
yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, my friend. I miss you. Stay healthy. And
thank you, Nick.
Hope to chat and see you soon.
I'm going to have to start a podcast so I can ask you questions. I feel like all I learned today was about me.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I'll show up as a guest, but okay.
So this is, is it called The Radical something?
It's called The Radical Podcast. Yes.
Cool. I love that word.
Built for, the dual meaning of the word. I think creative people like yourself are somewhat radical, and I think ideas and things can be very radical. It's certainly not meant in the political sense of the word.
Thanks for being radical and seeking out to amplify those doing radical things.
Well, that's our show this week. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned a little something. To follow what's going on with this podcast, you can go to theradicalpod.com. Theradicalpod.com. You'll find show notes and past episodes, and even a little swag there if you want a t-shirt or a hat. Also, I would be honored if you'd subscribe at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next week.